Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for joining me. Craig VandenBiggelaar, Visual Effects Supervisor for Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe, is joining me for this episode. He was responsible for a great deal of what it is that you see on screen, that you love from the show, and we're going to go through and have a discussion about a number of different things, from replicators to puddles to the evolution of motion capture, from the original Asgard puppets to Heimdall to what we saw in season 5 and what would later move forward. So I'm really interested in having this discussion with him, and I think you're really going to, if visual effects are your thing, this is one you're not going to want to miss. So let's bring him in. Craig VandenBiggelaar, Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, Universe, Visual Effects Supervisor through Image Engine. I am just now discovering. Sir, I am thrilled to have you on the Image Engine. You guys, your work was so key to the show, and what you've gone on and done since then is just so impressive. But I mean, it is tremendous to have you here. So I really appreciate you being here.
So I need to clarify, actually. I've left Image Engine in 2006.
Oh, okay.
And I started my own company, Darkroom Digital Effects, and continued to work on the series after I left Image Engine.
Okay, so Darkroom Digital Effects. All right, so we're going to look up that info. Oh, wow, okay.
Well, and there's not a lot of information on Darkroom Digital Effects. I've actually not had a website or a demo reel since I left Image Engine, just based on my contacts and reputation and work quality. I've just been busy since. So
okay, well, good.
You're not going to see a lot.
Craig, how did you fall in love with visual effects and with working into this industry? How did this all happen? Can you take me back?
Yeah, absolutely. So after high school, you don't know what you want to do. I loved physics. I loved art. How am I going to marry the two together? I tried architecture for a while and went to school for architecture, and happened to be fate. There were no jobs at the time. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll be a film director or something. I've always liked films. So I came to Vancouver to look at the film director course, and ended up seeing their visual effects computer animation course, and I fell in love. That was it. So I signed up for that, and the rest is history. I went back home in Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and was waiting for word from a lot of the places I applied. And at the end of the day, Image Engine hired me, and that was, that. I started at Image Engine.
What year was that?
1996.
1996. So right when SG-1 was in pre-production.
Right when it was in pre-production. And I remember, the first year at Image Engine, the partner saying, we got to get on this show. This show looks really cool. So, we got to, whatever it takes. So we did some spec pieces and some stuff on the fly. And we, at Image Engine, had been working on it ever since.
Wow.
I guess we did something right.
Something's working. And when you got a tiger by the tail, it can be a double-edged sword, so you got to be careful. What do you remember most fondly about working on this massive franchise?
Oh man, I mean, there are so many things. First of all, it was just a great production to work with. I mean, the people were amazing, and the creativity was amazing. And the way that the show fell into its groove allowed for creativity and expression through all fields. It wasn't just visual effects. You could see in the acting how the characters evolved and got along, and the writing got, evolved over time. But for me personally, it was just being able to push boundaries, doing things like spaceships and Stargate puddles and aliens and symbiotes and all sorts of fun, wild things that really wasn't on the table for other series at the time. So it was just this broad array of stuff to hone your teeth on and to have fun with.
Absolutely.
You got to play is how I thought.
Now, looking back on that era, it's a real, it's kind of redundant because all eras are transformative, but it's a real transformative era that the show sat on, from going from an era where you went through really practical models for a lot of things. That's John Gadecki was shot. You know, the season 1 and season 2 were practical models for especially the season 2 opening, right? To adopting the software that was able to carry a lot of that by the end of even SG1. You know, it's a really transformative time. Is there any technology that you used during SG1, Atlantis and Universe, that you were really impressed with by the time that it came to you? It's like, wow, you know, we could never have done this just a few years ago. Was there anything that really wowed you, or were you just always just being blown away by, hey, check it out, look at what we're doing now, and it doesn't cost $10 million?
So exactly. It's kind of a double-edged sword, that question, because everything was a struggle. It was new, right? Visual effects were new, and you had ILM doing Jurassic Park 3 years before, and you know, they had the resources and the money and the people to just, you know, pound that out, and everyone's jaw was on the floor and they saw that. So we were in an era where we were trying to replicate that, but we were a small studio. We had, like, initially it was just 3 of us, the owners and myself, and then we hired on a couple more guys, and for the longest time it was like 4 or 5 people working on Stargate, you know, putting out great work. But you know, the software was evolving. We started out on software called Alias Power Animator, which required like a long time Alias Wavefront. This was before Maya was even existing.
Prior Maya.
Prior
wow.
Maya. Maya bought Alias Wavefront. Wavefront was their particle simulator. Alias Power Animator was their animation suite. And Alias had bought Wavefront, hence they called it Alias Wavefront. And it was just this, you had to buy, I remember buying SGI Octane machines that were $80,000 a piece just to run a seat of this software. And we had 3 of them. So that was a big deal. And render, like, limitations, you couldn't do anything over 2 gigabytes of memory. And if you approach that, it was like, it was just a nightmare. And you had to trim things, and you had to really cut your teeth on how to be efficient. Nowadays, it doesn't matter. You know, I mean, everything is so fast. You just, what do I want to do creatively? And you can come up with it. And the software is huge nowadays. But back then, you really had to wrestle the software and the lighting. There was no such thing as built-in global illumination, or, you know, the ray tracing was super slow. So we would do what's called ray casting, and you would fake light bounces and reflections and just all
baking
of that
stuff into the shot, right?
Just bake stuff into the shot. And, you know, like, it was just such a different world back then.
We take for granted. Go ahead.
We totally take it for granted. And, you know, I look back now and you wonder, how did I get anything done, especially under episodic, you know, timeline. But then again, you had 22 episodes over an entire year with a summer break. So that afforded a lot of latitude. And nowadays, everything is streaming, and they want it now, and they, you know, get their footage into the editing suite, and, you know, within a week or 2, you've got stuff output for a lot of the smaller stuff. And the scale of a lot of the shows nowadays is so much bigger as far as environments and everything. And I remember doing matte paintings. That was fun too, where you have stuff on cards and you create these layers, almost like Walt Disney did to create depth in their 2D animation. And you would just subtly move the camera to fool the audience that this was a 3D world, but it really was just stuff pasted on cards in depth.
It's amazing what we can allow, what our brains will allow us to overlook as.
That's it.
Well, you're looking at a trick, but our brain will accept it as the narrative very easily and incorporate it into incorporate the trick into what we're being presented in order to get along with the story, and we don't even know it.
Yeah, well, and don't get me wrong, it took us a lot of, you know, testing to figure out, like, okay, will they buy into this, or are we going to have to improve it and, you know, do something else? And again, it was kind of a renaissance, like, how do we make this work mindset? And, you know, there was no at least for us in Vancouver, in such a small studio, there was no blueprint. It was, we know the tools. This is what our client is asking for.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make it look great. And, we'll do whatever we can to get there. And there was a lot of innovation and a lot of, sideways thinking and parallel thinking. And yeah, that was probably one of the best parts of starting on the series in that realm, is you were forced to want to do something realistic, but you were limited by the tools you had. So you had to think creatively.
Brad Wright has said that each puddle pass took $5,000.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
And by the end of Universe, I don't know if he had the conversation with Bruce Woloshyn over at Rainmaker or who, but by the end of Universe,
I like Bruce.
Bruce is a good guy.
Yeah.
Each puddle pass by the end of Universe cost $5,000. And he asked someone at some point, why? And it's still, you have to have someone go in there and paint each frame. That's how it was done with this show. You guys weren't putting lasers no. Into the start, because there was, and I had the conversation with Bruce once, it was about, you have to understand that they're wearing clothing, and the clothing is somehow interacting with the puddle in ways that, well, if you would feel it, you would get it. So just putting a laser in there and guiding the animator would not, because apparently tests were done and it wasn't convincing. Yeah. So hand painting these things frame by frame, man, oh man, there is a genuine artist at work in each of these shots.
That's it. Exactly. And, and you have a show where you have multiple puddle pass-throughs. So this is kind of the bread and butter. Okay. So whatever else is happening, there's puddle pass-throughs that are going to come through. So and laser blasts too, ridiculously expensive at the time because, again, software just wasn't as easy. So we literally would, we did it different than other houses. I know Rainmaker would have just used more of a compositing effect, but we would do a 3D teardrop.
Explain.
And so a teardrop, just basically a elongated shape of a teardrop. So you take a sphere and you create a tail on it.
Uh-huh.
So you've got this fat head with this tail on it, and we would render that a solid color. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to get, again, the depth. It's only on frame for, only on screen for about 2 frames, but you see it, up close and far away. So you want to get that correct sense of depth. Otherwise, it feels like,
this is not right. This doesn't feel real.
Not feeling it. So that was our approach. And so, it was relatively easy to do, but it meant another step to go through. And then we would take that to the compositor that would color correct it and add some glow. And we called them the A and B. So where it was shot from to where it got hit and whatever effects needed to happen there. But, we wanted to add that extra layer for laser blasts, but it still cost more money than, and it did at the end of the day too, because, you're nowadays you can do it, I don't know, maybe $100 instead of $1,200. There's an evolution there, but again, at the time, that was our approach. Same with the puddle. The puddles needed a hand, like you say, a reveal of the person as they go through the water, coming out or in. And a lot of times the ripples themselves needed a touch, a human touch, because it was either as they went through, the ripples felt too fast or too thick or viscous. And so you had to speed them up or slow them down. And it wasn't always a one solution to all of the puddle passes.
Wow. So someone had created an algorithm to
by hand. So
for the ripples.
For the ripples, it would, again, in our software, we had a ripple generator.
I see.
But we have to say what's the wavelength, the amplitude, and the speed.
Yeah.
And where's the origin of these ripples? And then you would have multiple sources of that. So, for example, my face went through, right? That's one ripple source. Shoulders were typically another. Torso was another. And when you put them all together, they have, interference patterns and just like real ripples in real life. I mean, clever software. But at the end of the day, let's say Jack O'Neill is jumping through really fast. Well, you need an intense ripple.
It has to respond accordingly, not just, it'll respond differently than someone just stepping through.
Exactly. Or if you have a character who just has their hand in the puddle, you're like, well, should it be rippling? But you need some sort of interaction, so you add a
Uh-huh.
ripple. So again, there's the creativity. There's the
Yeah.
human behind the keyboard making these decisions.
The
So
Stargate's a character. And
the Stargate is a character,
when you
yes.
have people interacting with it, you expect it to respond in some way. It's not
Exactly.
just inert.
Exactly.
Yeah. I remember Dean Devlin doing an interview for the Stargate feature film, and he added a shot, I'm pretty sure at the last minute, of James Spader putting his hands in the water and playing with it.
Yeah.
And the ripples, 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 ripples were going out. And
Yeah.
when they were developing the shot, the visual effects guys were saying, Dean, no.
Yeah.
We can't do that because the ripples are it's the ripples in the movie were much looser, much more like a pond or a puddle,
Exactly.
but also very excited at the same time. Compared to Stargate, they're fairly neutral by comparison.
Yeah.
And he was like, we're on this shot for like 15-20 seconds. The ripples are colliding with other ripples, and it's continuing to get more and more complicated. We can't pull that off.
Or you're just watching the meter run on the cost of the shot.
Money printer go burr.
Yeah, that's right.
But they made it work. They pulled it off, and it's one of the coolest scenes, in my opinion, in cinema.
Everybody looks at that scene, and you're like, I'm looking at a vertical pond. What's going on? This is wild. And the reflection of James Spader in the water, and they did such a good job on that. And I don't know, because we weren't on the first season, if it was a conscious decision not to have a reflection. But I mean, I'm sure it was a cost, decision to say, okay, we can't have reflections. That's going to be, 15 grand a puddle instead of 5, right?
Yeah. Because only so much you can do with the time and money that you have. Was money or time more of an enemy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Depends on the scenario. So if we're coming right into an episode and we're reading the script and we're setting up a quote for the script, and I would either say, guys, this is way too much, we can't do this, we have to pare it back. So initially the money was the issue. Sorry, not initially, but at the beginning of the process, the money was the issue. And then by the end of the process, it's, changes and creative decisions. And then, okay, we're running out of time and we're up all night and we're trying to deliver the best product we can. And then our computer fails and we run out of memory. And, time, always there's that crunch at the end. It doesn't matter. And there's a quote that I love in my industry. I mean, I love it and hate it, but it defines pretty much everything we do. And it's the quote is from, not obviously my industry, but it's often used. And that is, no shot is finished, it's abandoned. You have to come up to that time. So you quote as accurately as you can. The money is there, but being a boutique house at Image Engine when we were working on it, and then later on when I was doing Darkroom digital effects, it was, you put everything you can into it. It was a passion project. Everyone really loved what they were doing, and you're only as good as your last.
Every shot has your soul.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, we would pull all-nighters because we wanted to make it just right. I remember I had my appendix burst during Space Race, but it was...
No, that's one of the biggest visual effects episodes of the show.
And it was thankfully right towards the end, and the whole crew stepped in while I'm in the hospital, but everything worked because we had put in the time, so that we can make sure it would come together and make sure that all the pieces were looking good and that the production would get what they wanted, right? And it just kind of, that was the mindset around a lot of the visual effects people, at least the ones that I worked with, was, let's make something great. And it lasted for a long time, a lot of seasons in that way. So, for a TV series, there's a lot less burnout, I think, than a lot of other TV series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to wonder if your appendix had anything to, I'm sorry, but that had anything to do with the stress from the show. or if it was just, well, its time is up.
No, I think
did you not wonder that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you wonder a lot of things when you're in the thick of it. No, I think its time is just up. I mean, it's a funny, way to look at it. But no, it was just its time was up.
That was the life that was happening to you at the time of one of the biggest visual effects demands of
That's it.
the entire freaking show. Man,
That's it.
Gosh. Yeah. Outside of the Puddle, which is really what the show was known for, some of the more major creatures that were developed for the show that really stood the test of time were replicators. And I'm referring to the spider form. I'm not referring to the humans that came later. Were you involved at Image Engine in late season 3 when these guys
Nemesis
made their debut in Nemesis?
Yes.
Oh crap, what are we gonna do?
Oh shit, what's going on? They approached us and said, we want you to be the lead house on doing the replicators for this upcoming episode, and it's going to be big, and we're going to split it between 3 other visual effects, you and 2 other visual effects houses, but we want you guys to take the lead. And when they gave us the design, we're looking at the concept art being like, wait, those are all individual pieces? Yes. You want them to fall apart? Yes. And you want it to move like a spider? Yes. And we were just like, again, there goes the quote level. But at the end of the day, it was a really fun show to work on. I mean, we made it work. And I remember sitting there assembling 225 replicator blocks per replicator. That's the exact number. And, building the animation rig for it, and it's all hand done. When you see groups of those replicators, every single one of them at that time was done by hand, animated by hand. And every single time that they explode from gunfire was hand animated as far as an explosion. We would create 4 different explosion simulations, and we would run a dynamic simulation on it and then tweak them because the software and the computing power, again, couldn't handle everything. So we had to, hand keyframe where they're going to land. And there were certain scenarios where it worked on the ground, but not, around and coming on the ceiling and the walls. And
if they're on the ceiling, they're going to fall up based on their perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, there was a couple, and everyone's going to look at this now that I say this, but there was a couple where they just disappear, and we just literally switched them out with a bunch of, pieces just exploding just to make it easier and faster. Right. But there were you had your hero bugs, and then you had the swarm where you didn't pay attention to them. So usually the first 2 rows in the big swarm of replicators, or anytime there was an individual, the first 2 rows were hand animated. The rows behind that, where they were all overlapping, they were, pretty much on a cycle, just doing their thing. And if you just saw them on their own, they would be sliding all over the place, but you don't notice it because it's just this crowd of, feet and bodies and everything wiggling, dun, 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 doing their thing. And believe me, I know this.
Joel, miss him.
And at the end of the day, you don't notice it. And that goes right back to the, what can we get away with? What is the audience going to see versus what our software and hardware can produce within this time frame? And I think we pulled it off. I mean, we got an Emmy nomination for that one, which was fun. So, and quite a few other Replicator episodes after that we got Emmy nominations for. So they obviously were a favorite, so.
For sure. Yeah. I remember the last, I watched the episode as it aired originally and was just blown away because at this point there was a mythology built into the show that the Asgard are kept busy for some reason by some real big problem. And so when that's revealed, it had better be good. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, Star Trek replicators? No, these things completely different. Yeah. It took a while for the brain to be like, okay, that's not what that is anymore. Yeah. That is these things now.
No, and we're not making Earl Grey hot on this show.
Exactly right. But the last shots of Nemesis, where you have, it had to have been 200 of them maybe
Yeah,
more,
at least,
in the wide shot as they're marching in
yeah.
to that main hall there, is one of the most amazing shots of the show. And not only that, but not only do you have to have the and this is something specific to the Replicators in particular because of how fast they move, the bodies, but the computer also has to add a blur.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that's extra computation?
Oh yeah.
It can't be a clear shot when you freeze the frame. They're in motion, and our eyes are used to out of focus when something is in motion.
Yeah. So we would render groups of them.
Oh.
And then composite them together. So the computer could handle maybe 10 to 20 depending on how close they are in frame, and then we would organize front to back and left to right, and then have that those rendered elements composited together in the 2D software over the plate. So that's how we got around that solution. Later in Ark of Truth, when I was working on that, I had a guy program a walk cycle so it would detect the walls and various, because we're on the spaceship, and the walls, and the walls are obviously not smooth like the Nemesis. So I had a program like, oh, okay, we're going to detect where the walls are and automate it, and all we had to do is drag the torso around, and the legs just kind of did their thing, which was fun. But it's a huge contrast from Nemesis, right? And that's kind of the evolution of the whole series. Is everything started out like, we can't do this, but we're going to try, and then we did, and we thought a lot of it was groundbreaking.
Well,
there's a couple
times.
Yeah. And there's a couple times that we were quite proud. There was, if I may,
please
tangent a little bit, Revelations with Heimdall.
Yeah.
Right. Was it Heimdall? I think it was
Heimdall. Anyway. Was the first fully, technically, Freyr came through the Stargates, but Revelations
fair enough, yes.
was the first episode that we had fully CG Asgard.
And I think it was the first, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, but from what I know is it was the first kind of guest star CG character.
So in
fully CG,
yeah. And I must correct myself. Asgard had been seen in specific shots earlier in the show, like Thor gets out of his chair, he walks over, but he's very rudimentary. Heimdall, I'm pretty positive, was the first fully CG character introduced in the show. I'm racking my brain to make sure that's right. I'm pretty positive, and Teryl played him. So,
Teryl did, and I remember doing motion capture with Teryl. It was really fun. Wow. She has a dancing background, so she does. There's a lot of flourish in the character. We had to kind of ask, okay, maybe not. We might want to tone that down a little bit. No, but what I'm referring to is, there was a CG Thor before that, and we had CG Asgard, but to have such a major role throughout the episode, there was a lot of shots. And it was the first one that we had done motion capture with, which was really fun. And it was the first one we had actually used high dynamic range lighting with. So this is a part of the evolution of the tool set. So we actually took the illumination from the set and used that to illuminate the character instead of faking it with our computer lights and spotlights and point lights. And
that's when the ball comes into play there.
You use the spherical ball and you wrap that in your 3D environment. And if you do your HDR image correctly, you'll be able to source the intensity of the lights and the color temperature, and you could use it for reflections, obviously, which makes a huge difference. And so that was our first use of high dynamic range lighting, which became standard in the industry afterwards. I mean, we had been reading white papers, and this is what those guys are doing. Let's try it. And it was pretty groundbreaking for a TV series. Yeah.
It's a pretty extraordinary character. I remember watching it and just buying that he's there. That was the one thing that there were a couple of things that I was thinking in this was, wow, they've finally gone there. Are they going to continue to do this? And also, they probably had realistically a fair amount of money left over from previous episodes. So they were like, go for it. He couldn't have been cheap to create, because you're talking dozens of shots of him standing alongside Carter and interacting with the character. My favorite scene from this is O'Neill reaches out his hand, and it's all done off camera for Heimdall to shake it, and Heimdall is like shaking him vigorously, and you don't see it on camera, but the implication is that he's just wagging his hand. It was a fun character, man, and Teryl must have been a blast.
And Richard Dean Anderson, he played that up a lot, which was really good. And I remember, I think it was Brad, right? Said, and please don't misquote me, I think it was, said, we want him to shake his hand. And we're just like, too much money. We can't interact with anybody. Okay, we'll do it off screen. We're still going to shake his hand. And that's where that came out of, so. But it was a great character. The mocap people that James Titchener found, it was again breaking ground for them, because we had the set built and there was that giant ramp Teryl had to walk down, and they had to figure out how to capture that mocap coming down this big set remotely. Like, this wasn't on their stage with their their setup. They had to come to our stage and set it up there and make it all work. And it worked beautifully. Like, it was really good. We had to do a lot of animation fixes and tweaks to help blend things together. But at the end of the day, it was just really fun to do mocap and watch this character come to life. There's one shot in particular where Heimdall's looking at the pod, the human Asgard hybrid in cryostasis. And it's a shot on the glass, and the hand comes up and just goes down. And that's all you see. But there was so much feeling behind that, and they really ran with it, which we were happy with. It was a really fun thing to do.
When you look at a character like Gollum,
yes. Jaw-droppingly good, because you're making this human now an artificial thing. It's not a human being that you're seeing. No.
The artistry of the human is coming through into this artificial thing and making us feel something back.
That's it.
My gosh, that's a leap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of that is technology leaps, time, budget. I mean, Gollum, you have to get it right. This is Lord of the Rings. Right. And if you don't get it right, nobody is gonna want to watch it. So but I remember watching that, and actually Heimdall was on my mind, because I was like, I wish we had the budget for Heimdall to do that. Because it was so good watching Gollum, all of the subtlety.
But what you did, and in my opinion, is the greatest test of that character. Thor is on his back on some kind of, he's always occupied with something to hold him down. And you have Heimdall walk beside him while O'Neill is with him, and the shot works. I, as an artist, would have been scared about that the most. It's like, okay, here's the physical puppet with the lighting in the room, and we've got a digital creature right next to him who is his brother. It's all intents and purposes. They're exactly the same. They don't even have different characteristics. You have to be able to, as an audience member, buy one as much as buying the other, because they are sharing the same space and the same lighting conditions. And it was
fun. And it worked. And that was one of our, oh dear God, I hope this works moments. And we thought it did. So, thank you for that, passing that back, because it was great. It was, and again, one of those episodes where there was a lot of like, okay, we're going to do this. Let's do it right. Mm-hmm. So we there's a lot of sleepless nights, but it was well worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What shots from the show do you remember took the most time, A, and B, cost the most money? And I've got a couple in my head that are some of my favorites in the show that I'd be interested to know if you were involved in. And while your brain is noodling that, I will start. The scene in Full Circle where the pyramid explodes is one of the most extraordinary moments in the show, because emotionally we have to connect back to Abydos and the people who were on there in the movie. And you also have a physical miniature that is detonating, but you have to sweeten it. You can't just have, because it's only, it's still like, I think it was still a 10 by 10 pyramid. It was huge. Were you there on set for that?
I wasn't on set for it, but we
Okay.
did end up doing the work of the subsequent shockwave going through the
Yeah.
sand in the desert. So yes, we worked on that shot
Wow. How was
and
that?
compositing it together.
Was there a sense of we really need to get this one right?
It was, again, speaking of the legacy, we were well aware of the connection with the film
Yeah.
and the history of Abydos and the whole, like, this is something big. And yeah, we really felt like, yeah, we have to try to get this right. Dynamic effects like the sand,
Hmm.
blowing, and the individual grains of sand you look at nowadays is so much better than the technology we have back then. So
Sure.
in some ways I cringe looking at it, because but I also know it's like, well, we just had our limitations and
Yeah.
we did the best we can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, the concussion wave of all the different elements, because it doesn't just end at the pyramid; it goes on to
No.
destroy the village,
Yeah. It just
and the whole
obliterates.
surrounding area. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was fun. And we wanted a lot of impact on that for sure.
was that an
For sure.
expensive shot? I would think so.
Relatively not too bad. Not too
Really?
bad.
Okay.
Every time, you do, I mean, it all comes down to how many hands have to be on it or
Okay.
how long you need to research it. So, we kind of knew what we were doing with dynamics and getting these effects happening. So it wasn't too bad. But wanting to nail it, you always pad in a little bit of budget for playing with the shot, not just not just running it through a process and saying, here you go, right?
Okay.
We always have padded in a little bit of budget for creativity and nailing it best we can.
Okay.
So
What others do you remember?
we're talking like Reckoning Part 1 and 2 were huge.
Yes.
You had replicators, you had fleets. Every time there was a fleet of attack starships coming in, you're just like, oh god, because again, they were heavy to render. And let me just tell you, every season we would upgrade the models. We would add a little more detail or refine the textures or up-res something, and so they were ever evolving. We never kind of just sat back and said, oh well, let's just use a season 1 model. No, we kept upgrading them. And by the time we got to Reckoning 1 and 2, we had enough horsepower and enough people to say, okay, we can do multiple replicators. We can build this Dakara, landscape map painting and make it live more and put, avatars walking around and all that stuff. And you can have, just battles and explosions. And and that's the other thing, exploding attack ships, that's expensive. You have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10, it gets really expensive.
Absolutely.
And, the replicator spaceship was fun because it was just such a
the long one. It was
so
cool, man.
Yeah.
And when it disintegrates, when the wave hits it,
that was
the particle
another
count
one of those
was high.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the creative, how do we do this? I don't know how we're going to do it. They just kept upping the ante from one replicator bug to now we got to do a whole spaceship and, multiple, and it just kept getting, almost every time they would come up with a replicator show, we'd be like, oh no, what are we in for? And at the end of the day, it was always fun to work on, but they were challenges and they kept upping the ante. And I think, we met the ante. So
when you get to Ark of Truth, and you get to the script, or maybe they were just told you in advance, yeah, we're going to bring the replicators back, was part of you like, oh god.
Part of me was definitely, oh god. And then you had the Ori ship, and then you had and again, talking about software and hard. So basically I did all the replicators for our Ark of Truth myself, right? And I did most of the Ori battle scenes myself, right? That's when I did Darkroom digital effects. And you're like, okay, yeah, I can take this on. And Robert Cooper was great because he had a lot of trust in me because I'd worked with him for years, and I kept thinking, Robert, you're crazy. Like, don't bring this all to me. And he's like, yeah, no, you got it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's all I need to hear, because I'm going to want to rise to the challenge. Robert knew exactly how to bring people, how to up their game. He was really good at that.
You want to do it right for him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But Ark of Truth, so the replicators, at first you're like, okay, we have, the replicated replicator, the one that was built with the Asgard technology. And it's just a few shots here and there. But then you get to the end when they're, shooting these things in the hallway and you're just like, okay, how are we going to do that? So I went through and said, I'm just going to lay it all out. And I showed Robert, and he's like, whoa, that's too many. But it was the same approach. You did layers and then composite them together to get them in and work for the audience. And
Well,
like I said previous, we automated the animation. The guy I hired to automate the footfalls and stuff.
man. But then Curry Graham played James Merrick, who gets
Yes.
eaten by one of these things. They
Yeah.
changed their behavior because, if we're going to bring him back, we're going to do something different with him.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
had this thing that looked so good. The comparisons, you cannot help but go to the Model 10, the Cyberdyne
The
Systems
T101, yeah.
101 Terminator. There had to, I as an artist would have been like, I can't make it look like this. We have the concept art for it. It has to look like, but this has to move differently. It has to feel like a replicator.
Yeah. But a broken replicator that got blown up and came out of a human husk.
Right? Exactly. It's kind of like Skeletor.
Exactly. And there's a lot of like, every shot you do, you want to reference something, whether it's real life or something that's been done before. Visual effects always borrows off of what we've seen. And there's trends, if you notice, in the sci-fi industry. It's like, oh, well, this is the flavor. Abyss came out and then Stargate came out with water effects, and it like, there's always, the liquid metal of the T1000, and okay, there's that trend. And for a time, everything was morphing. And for another time, everything, now everything is, fine particles and disintegrating and, Infinity War and stuff. And so, looking at that character was very much what do we reference? Like, I don't know what a blown up human replicator looks like. So there was some reference to the original Terminator, walking and kind of beaten up, so there was a little element of like, okay, we could do that. But at the same time, what are the mechanics of the character that we have? And how would they move in that situation?
Yeah. You're taking something that's a quadruped and it's now a biped. The logistics behind that are pretty self-evident.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah. So,
made it work.
It's all challenging and made it work.
Absolutely. And looking at episodes like Space Race, where you had these visual effects heavy sequences, really, really, I can't imagine, dealing with situations where, oh, please, even when you have like an $80,000 piece of software, doesn't mean it's not going to crash and you have to start all over rendering again.
Exactly. There's, and you put in, as you evolve your work, you put in safeguards. So you get to a point, you save it, and when you're rendering things, you get a feeling for when stuff is going to crash. You get a feeling for like, okay, so we have all of these ice asteroids we have to fly through. None of the spaceships were rendered within the ice asteroid belt, right? They were all rendered separately with stand-in holdbacks so that we can, again, layer them in the compositing software. And nowadays you could just throw it all together and say go, and you'd have the proper lighting. But you still composite, you still do your layers, you still have that creative control because it's faster at the end of the day. But back then we had to be very judicial about, how are we going to break this down so we can handle it.
Okay, so you could use you could composite all of them into well, not composite is the wrong word. You could render all of the original elements into a single shot if you wanted to, but it would just slow everything down and
of course,
bring everything to a grinding halt.
Yeah.
So do layers and layers and then assemble them. I do the same thing in video editing.
That's exactly
do this over here. Let the computer crunch this, and now that's done. And put this in, and just make sure that the pieces that come in after are fluid with what they're flying by. So
yeah, exactly. Wow. So it's either that or it's a matter of we need to break up the control because these ice blocks that we're flying through will need more attention than these other spaceships or the stars in the background or whatever, right? So there's a lot of creative decisions made as far as what layers do we break up for what purpose. And other times it's a matter of like, okay, so we're pushing the limits of our hardware. Yeah. And if I put in, one more spaceship in this, race of spaceships flying through this asteroid belt, the whole thing is going to catch fire and we're going to have to, evacuate the building because we're pushing things so hard.
Yeah. You're
right?
overclocking just a little bit there.
Literally the straw that breaks the camel's back most of the time. We would push things right to the limit. So
because you can feel where it's going. You can see I'm sure you're watching the status screens on how cool your devices are and where it's peaking and everything else. You can feel it coming.
All the time. All the time.
Push it to the limit.
We hit abort a few times. We're like, abort before this gets worse. Because sometimes once it starts crashing, you can't stop it. So it gets into this like, all right, we're hard disk swapping and stuff is just going to grind to a halt. And we're just like, okay, no. So yeah.
This is absolutely wild. I want to get into, are you good for a few more minutes?
Yeah.
I want to get into, I'd love to have you back because we've mostly talked about SG-1. Did you have anything to do with Be All My Sense Remembered, the battle over Asuras with the Replicator planet? Was that you at all with that massive fleet of Wraith and Human and Traveler going after these Replicators, the blob on the surface? Was that any of you at all? Or was that more
in Atlantis? That was no, unfortunately I didn't do that one.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a great episode.
Yeah.
And, there was a lot of stuff that just, no, I didn't do that one.
Okay. I'm curious as a layman, when someone comes to you and says, okay, you're going to take the lead on this, but we're also giving this to 2 or 3 other houses.
Yeah.
Why isn't it all you? Is it, we know how much manpower you have. We need it within this time frame, or we've got a lot of money for this. We want to spread it around to a few different houses and give them a piece. What is it? Is it just time? Is it they know the resources that you have and anticipate how much it's going to take?
Production is all about time.
Okay.
And the delivery date is the delivery date.
Okay.
And they know like, okay, Image Engine has now 20 people. And Rainmaker has however many people, and we have to divvy that up so that we can get it all delivered on time. And every time we did that, it was a nail biter because you have different techniques for lighting and different techniques for compositing. And if you notice the Alkesh, like I had done the first episode Dead Man Switch with the Alkesh. And so basically we built it, but
that's
then
the cargo ship. The cargo ship. Yeah, the Alkesh came in the end of season 4.
Sorry. You're right. Sorry, the cargo.
Close though. Good for you. Yeah.
Memories.
Yeah, I think it's called I think it's a Teltac. So, but yeah, you still got it.
Is that the old name? Yeah, Teltac. And they wanted the door going in and out. But basically, my point is, so I had built that, and we had to pass it off to Rainmaker for another episode because you have to overlap because and it would be often. Image Engine would do one, and Rainmaker would do another, and Lost Boys, or Atmosphere or Gadecki or someone would do another episode because you got to keep the machine going, and we can't wait for one house to do it all. We're not ILM. This was Vancouver, back in the late '90s, early 2000s, and we just weren't that big to have one house handle it. Yeah. So Rainmaker would do their take on the cargo ship, and it looked different. It looked slightly different, but it's okay.
They tweaked the model?
Oh, yeah. Their approach was a little different. Their textures didn't show up quite the same. And it was, but I look at it as, we have a Corolla versus a Camry, I mean, no, I don't think anyone really paid attention to it. But those are some differences that you notice when you're in the show, you're like, wait, that doesn't look, wait, and we would always try to make them look the same. So, that was one of the downfalls working with other houses, but it was also a godsend because you had time to really finesse what you were working on and not always feel like you were just being a factory churning out effects.
Oh man.
Yeah. And that's what I liked about sharing the work.
Absolutely. You're as a team. And I get, the cargo ship, you got, 20 different Goa'uld flying around with these things. They're not all coming out of necessarily the same factory at the same time.
Yeah,
just like our models, things would have evolved. So, that makes a lot of sense.
You can get away with it. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't need the exact same thing, but the audience needs to believe that they are, the same
Right. Technology.
category. Technology.
The where it breaks down for me, where it is my soapbox, is, and I'm curious if you notice this as well, the Pegasus Stargates with 8 chevrons on them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, guys, we're missing one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was a lot of, like, I mean, that's all the writers, and they're gonna steer the ship, and we just kind of, as visual effects, kind of show their vision,
Okay.
what's in the script, so I mean, I don't have a lot of comment on the different chevrons in Pegasus Galaxy.
Okay.
This is the Milky Way.
No, yeah,
it is what it is.
No, absolutely. The amount of work that you guys did over those years to churn all this stuff out. So you took over from Darkroom Digital Effects in 2006.
Yes.
And how long were you under that banner?
Oh, I still am. I
still
still
are.
am. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's just not a lot. Okay, you need to get a website. I'd like to see some of
Yeah,
this work presented.
I'm working on it. After the strikes, I need a website now, because the industry's just kind of slowed down in Vancouver. So
what are you working on?
Currently, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. So it's like I said, it's been really slow since the strikes. But before that, it was Charmed and other various small movies and whatnot. So yeah,
people are really feeling the pinch right now. I was talking with Joseph Malazzi about it in Canada. They're feeling just as badly, if not more, than we are in Hollywood. Yeah. I hope for the best, but I hope that everyone can plan for the worst, because I fear that what they're saying is true, that the salad days of streaming is over. And so there's going to be a real contraction in terms of the amount of content that's coming out, and there's going to be families that just aren't going to get fed unless they go and look into some other career. So you got to make it work, man.
Yeah. So. No, I'm gonna stay in visual effects. I'm pretty sure. Good. I'll find my niche again and figure out. It's what I love.
Yeah.
I love this job. I hate this job. It's it's I want to sleep, but I love what I'm doing. I can't go to sleep. It's all good.
Those nights where it's like, I really need to be sleeping right now, but I'm concentrating on the problem that I'm going to have tomorrow because I'm so excited about cracking it.
That's right.
There's something to be said for that.
You're a problem solver.
That's it.
And you're trying to replicate or recreate the world around you so the audience believes it, and hopefully you can help them escape their world while you're doing so. So,
what do you feel about Unreal 5? And
amazing.
The lighting and the volume technology that we're using now, to put up these giant monitors behind the scenes where you don't have to deal with blue and green screen anymore. The lighting, the collisions, they're all in the shot right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's expensive, and that's going to have a trickle down effect, and it's going to become more and more common, hopefully. I see a lot of the tools that are, you can look at it one of two ways. It can either replace your job, or it can make your job easier. So how are you going to adapt to that? And that could go through with AI, that could go through with these video monitors on Unreal 5. I remember when motion capture was coming out, and it was just like, holy smokes, we don't need animators anymore. Well, yeah, you certainly do, because it's not flawless. And, we've seen some motion capture where it's very dead and very wooden, and, you're always going to need, I think, a human touch. Like, I don't think anything will ever replace that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and modern technologies also pull back on other things as well. I remember having a conversation with Bruce Woloshyn about the advantage of doing explosions in film. You can tune the color and make things really look good. Whereas in digital, when you get an explosion, what you see is what you get. And if you look at some of the shots in Atlantis, it's yellow, it is what it is. It's been captured. Yeah. You can't really tweak it unless you, add effects on top of it. It's just there. Right. So there's always going to be an exchange.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's, I think, worth it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a place for practical effects. There's a place for visual effects. There's a place for Unreal Engine replacing, a lot of human hands. That, quite honestly, it's tedious work. Let's add in a reflection on a shiny helmet. Like, no one wants to sit there and do that all day long. They want to get into some other things. So there's a lot of benefits to new technology coming out.
Are you looking forward to handing off some of the more tedious stuff to AI while you work on the
Yeah.
more interesting stuff?
Yeah,
Because
100%.
it's coming.
Yeah, no, it's here. I
Yeah.
mean, it is absolutely here. And my biggest thing is copyright, and where are they sourcing all this stuff?
Yep.
And everybody is concerned about it. If my work is training AI, I'm going to feel, pretty upset about it, and because other people then can use that for their benefit for free. And there's a big trickle down effect there that I think is a whole other interview. But
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But are you optimistic?
I am optimistic on that sense for me,
Yeah.
for it to help me in the future. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Craig, this has been really cool. I appreciate you
It's
taking
been
the
fun.
time and exploring these facets with me. There so much work was done in these shows. I'd love to have you back later this year to talk just a little bit more if you'd be interested, because I do want to get into more of these facets of, okay, what is it that you guys used and what is coming to replace it, because we're not slowing down. And when I look at the transformation of our society from all these tools over the last several years, it does feel like we're in fact speeding up, and we're all just fighting to keep up and continue to find ways to stay relevant in our particular fields. So it's going to be not going to be boring.
No. And I'd be happy to talk to you again. I mean, we barely scratched the surface of shows and episodes, and I'm sure your audience would, want to know some more about some other shows and
absolutely.
So, by all means, if you have the time, we can set something up for later.
Sir, I will always have the time for you. I appreciate you coming to join us.
All right. Thank you, David.
Thank you. That was Craig VandenBiggelaar, Visual Effects Supervisor, SG-1 Atlantis and Universe of Darkroom Digital Effects Incorporated. I've generally had communication with people and gotten to know them a little bit before sitting down and doing an interview. Craig, I'd never even seen his face, and so I was like, well, you know what? Let's see what kind of a conversation I'm going to have with this guy. And I think I've made a new friend, because he's really cool and is very informative and knowledgeable about what it is that the Stargate brand is. And I cannot wait to have him back, because he really gets it, and he remembers the specific moments of the show that really stand out to me as well. So it seems like a Stargate fan behind the scenes as well. There were a lot of those people who worked on the show it was just not a job to them. It was also something that they were very passionate about in their own right. And I think that's the recipe that made Stargate last for 17 seasons on television. You can't do that if you don't have people who are genuinely passionate about the product and willing to put in that extra mile. Before we go, if you enjoy Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, please click that like button. It really makes a difference with YouTube and will continue to help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend, and if you want to get notified about future episodes, click subscribe. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this episode will be released over the course of the next few weeks on the Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net YouTube channels. My tremendous thanks to my moderating team, Tracy, Anthony, Jeremy, Marcia, Summer. You guys make the show possible episode after episode. Couldn't keep it going without you. My producer, Linda Gategaber Fury, thank you so much. Big thanks to Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web. He's our web developer on Dial the Gate who keeps things up and running. Matt Wilson, Eagle SG, Bryce Orrs, my visual guys, they make the show look as good as it does. We've got a number of different episodes heading your way for Season 4. Keep it on dialthegate.com to see the complete updated schedule. As soon as I get someone booked, I put it there, and I use that page to reference dates and times to memorize and make sure that I have everything straight. So if you want to know what's coming up next, dialthegate.com is the place to be. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project, and I will see you on the other side.